Today's Raising Greats is going to be different. The woman that you see in the middle in this picture is Helen Smallbone, mother to Rebecca St. James and the band for King and Country. Her children made a movie about how she got them through their toughest season of life, and it just released in theaters, and it's absolutely a must-see. I had the honor of being in a mom's group with Helen for years, and the group was invited to see a special preview of the movie and then do a Q&A with Helen and David after. Not only was the movie so incredible, but their words are so powerful. Whether you are the mom or the dad of your family, I think it's a must to listen to their words that they share here. I got permission from Helen to share this with you all, and for that I am so thankful. Thank you, Helen. Her group that she co-founded and that I was a part of for years until I started homeschooling is called Mom Life, and it stands for Mothers Uplifting Mothers, and I know that is exactly what she is going to do for you all today. So let's get to it.
I definitely had an emotional response because I cried through the whole movie, and I'm a wreck. But I was watching Candace Cameron Bure in an interview, and she said that they didn't put in all the miracles because it would seem not that believable. What were some of the things that they did not include that happened in your story when you came over?
I think one of the things that wasn't shown in the movie, and Helen will think of something else while I'm sharing this, but when we lost that record deal 31 years ago with Word Records, a guy from People's Church, now Church of the City, came to us and said, "I heard the deal didn't go through. I want to give you $10,000 because that was the advance we were supposed to get, and it was going to help us get out of poverty." And it just reminded me of my lack of self-worth. I was shaking in my boots on a daily basis then. So I went back to him and said, "What about I give you half of Rebecca's publishing?" He didn't want to take it, but he said, "Okay, I'll take it, because if I don't take it, the record label will take it." Over the next 10 years, it's a guy in the movie called Jed, his real name is John Moore. Over the next 10 years, this is just an incredible story. And it challenged me on the importance of God's economy. But that money that he gave us, when he took half of Rebecca's publishing over that next 10 years, it was worth somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000. And it just reminded me of the wonder of God's economy. When we attempt to follow him, and we were I was in a broken state. Helen was pretty good, as some of you ladies know, Helen is pretty stable, even when the going gets tough, and I just love that about her. I cry when I talk about two people. I cry when I talk about Helen. I cry when I talk about Jesus, because Helen loved me unconditionally when I was feeling worthless, and Jesus challenged me to give my life away. But that, to me, I now, after that experience, show business leaves me cold. I've worked in the music business for 58 years, and a lot of that in Christian music. And a lot of times we buy into the principles of show business. I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in God's economy. And there was many, many other miracles, and Helen will tell you one or two now as well, but that was one of them.
Well, I've just got a quick one. When I went to the doctor, I got a referral. I didn't know any doctors. I had not been to a doctor before I came to America. I didn't know any. I found one that was recommended to me by a friend. And when we went to him, David said, "We don't have insurance, is that okay?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "We may need help with finances as well. Would you be open to helping us? Because we're going to be self-pay." And he said, "Oh no, yeah, that's fine, I'll help you." So we got the bill at the end of probably 2 months, at the outside 3 months now. He was very gracious. He did very minimal testing. I think he checked my iron, that was it, because I was being anemic before. And then we get the bill, and it's double what we would pay in Australia for probably 10 weeks care maybe. And so both of us were like, oh, not only the hospital bill, which most of it was paid miraculously, as it says in the movie. We do think the same guy, John Moore, paid it, but he has to this day, never said he did. But anyway, David went to the doctor afterwards and said, "Do you remember when we checked in with you that you might help us with the doctor's bill?" And he said, yeah. And he said, "Well, it wasn't reflected on the bill. Are you still open to doing that?" And he said, "Sure." And then he said, "Well, what would you pay in Australia?" And David told him the figure. And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And that was about half the bill.
Wow, that was awesome, and I cried like a baby. And Heather knows I'm a crier, and I cry. David, how do you think, like, if you were to rate, give a grade, how do you think Joel did?
That's a hard one and an easy one. Helen made the comment we're exhausted actually because we're doing interviews. I think we've done 4 or 5 or 6 today, and we're just not used to this stuff. We're happy to connect our daughter and our sons up with doing interviews. So we're a little tired tonight. So Helen was talking to somebody today, and they asked. That person asked that question, and she made the comment, she never thought Joel actually looked like me, but looking back at photos of me at that time, and then the way he did his hair and all that type of stuff, he actually does, he ends up looking like me. And I think he did remarkably well. Do you want to tell them a story about, you'll tell it better than me. I'm 74, so I had a birthday party 4 years ago. And Joel's gift to me was to stand on tables, which, believe it or not, I used to do at one stage. I'm sometimes a bit crazy, I'm a little out there. I don't drink alcohol, but sometimes people would think I do. And he stood up on the table and just did stand-up comedy and sent me up for about 20 minutes. I've never laughed so much in my life. Do you want to tell them about that?
Well, I think you just did tell me. What I think comes out of it for Joel playing David, Joel and David are very similar characters in lots of ways, and David owns a third of For King Country, so the 3, Joel, Luke and David, are the owners of For King Country, and so it's a 3-man, well, it's 2 votes obviously win, and David does get voted out occasionally, which he finds extremely hard. But anyway, so Joel and he can butt heads fairly well. But I have noticed since he played David in this movie, he's a lot more generous to his father because he's partly walked through his experience, and now he has a lot more understanding maybe and compassion in his kind to his father than he ever has been.
I'll tell you something interesting about our conversation. Don't tell Joel or Luke if you run into them down at Kroger or something. So it was last year sometime, and they voted me out on something, and I was 73 at the time. You know what us old people are like, woe is me, the sky is falling, and I'm a bit over the top. And I go to Helen and I say, hey baby, it's time for me to retire, they're not listening to me anymore. And she just like she does in mum life, she gave me brilliant advice. She came back and said, David, she found out this data just a little while ago. The most productive years of your life are in your 60s. The second most productive time in your life is in your 70s. I'm in my 70s. And the third is in your 50s. Since then, I haven't threatened to retire. And so I heard what she had to say. But all to say is, I'm a pretty strong-willed guy. And when they were writing the script, they sent the script to Helen and I, and wanted to get our feedback. This was in the September before October. They filmed in October 22. I decided that I didn't want to impact the story because I felt if I went and did that, it would take away from Joel and Luke's overview of what that's seen in our lives. Helen read it, and the only thing she went back to the boys and said is, make sure you don't leave out the miracles. But in a funny kind of way, I think by me telling you that story, it says something about the similarities that Joel and I have in our personalities. But I'm pretty astonished that they've taken our story and made it very real, because so many people have come to us and said, hey, I've come out of this theatre with a different perspective. A couple of months ago, a guy was at a showing somewhere, and he when we were doing previews, they would ask people to make comments after they'd seen the movie, and this guy came and said, after seeing the movie, I'm going to go home and love my family better. And I just thought that was very, very, very encouraging to me.
How many people saw any of the family in the movie? I'd like to say when there's 9 of us, I'd like to go up and say, how many saw one? How many? Well, every single person, you're right, does have a cameo in the movie. Heather was right, David and I are on the train. Probably Rebecca's the most obvious, right at the beginning as the flight attendant. Libby's probably, if you know what Libby looks like, is reasonably obvious because she delivers herself. She's the nurse. Yeah, it's so it started out fairly randomly that they were including cameos, and then on one of the last scenes, which is actually the last scene of the movie at the Creation Festival, I asked everybody to come to the filming that day because there were certain members of the family who were hesitant to be involved, and I'm like, come on, just stop being a spoilsport. And so they did all get filmed. The ones that hadn't been in the movie up to that time did all get filmed. The only one who's really hard to find, and I've watched the movie about 5 times, and I've only now seen him once because someone had to tell me where to look for him, and that is our son Ben, who had actually a scene in the movie. It was filmed, and it got cut. Oh. So they had to be creative, so he's on the cereal box. It's called Benji, and he's in the faces on it.
So I love how you guys were honest with your kids in the process. My question is, they were kids at the time, and clearly the movie is filmed from the adult perspective. I mean, theirs as well, but from your perspective, Helen, and yours, David, in the process, when did that come to fruition, or when did they come and talk to you and say, how was that? What did you feel like in those moments, or did they kind of glean that just from their own experience and fill in?
So you're saying, did they know what was going on in our lives back then?
Really more the emotional part of it. Like you're on the plane and you're crying about leaving Australia. Did they recognize that and put it in the movie, or was there conversation going on between you guys and the kids on this is how we want to present this?
One of the interesting things in the movie that is very real, particularly on our second year in America, Helen's mother would call up every month crying on the phone saying, it's not working in America, it's time to come home. And the incredible thing about my wife, she never faltered. When I didn't believe in myself, she still believed. And so one of the thoughts that I wanted to share with all you ladies in the room is, if your husband's going through a hard time, make sure, a job loss or whatever, and it happens to us all, make sure you're very sensitive, because had Helen been tough on me at that time, I would have had a nervous breakdown. I think when we first arrived here, we were on survival mode, and all we had was our own little community. We knew some people from the church, but we didn't know them very well. So we confided with the kids on everything. We were totally honest. We didn't have any secrets with them. And I remember Joel praying. We had no furniture in the house, and 31 years ago he was 8 at the time, just praying fervently that the Lord, and to this day, I remember that moment in prayer. And I think it came out of us being transparent. I don't think we were that transparent with our kids in Australia when everything was going along pretty nicely. But when pressure was on, and Helen made the decision at that same time to homeschool, because we lived in Lipscomb Drive over there at Brentwood, and we had a school a quarter of a mile down the road, and she needed community. And so that was one of the reasons we kept the kids at home. But they were our community because we had no relatives here. I was an outcast in the industry, the music industry, because I'd lost so much money. I was a bit of a leper. You know, that shows up in the movie in the movie pretty well. But it was a really fascinating time together, and bonded us together. And we had the kids out there work. You know, the kids were, because we homeschool, they could work. They went out and what it shows in the movie, they were out there mowing lawns, cleaning houses, all those type of things. A lot of things Americans don't like to do, but they have a very strong work ethic. Both Helen and I will say, on marketing this movie, and most of them have been involved, I've never seen anything like it. Like, they've been crisscrossing the country. They've gone and played at most of the mega church, a lot of the big mega churches in America. They've done worship in the morning and then showed the movie in the afternoon. It's all been quite extraordinary, and it came out of that bonding season where the dad was pretty broken, Helen was pretty strong, and we survived, I believe, by prayer and People's Church, now Church of the City, loving on us. The other church, which was very important to us, was Brentwood Baptist. It was a Sunday school class at Brentwood Baptist that furnished our house, and that came about because one of the guys, Greg Nelson, a big Sandy Patty's producer, came to our house one night, saw that we had no furniture, went back and told the Sunday school class, and 2 weeks later, that's when all the furniture arrived.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Helen. Tell us about the slap, because I know that you don't recommend that. But tell us, have you guys ever talked about that since? Did you apologize? Do we need to have a moment right now?
Can you please apologize?
Well, the slap did not occur in America, nor in that way. David actually never spoke that aggressively to Rebecca in those early days. He was very, very kind and supportive because, I mean, she's a kid. However, there was a slap. It would have been about 5 years into our marriage, I think, when David used to work. We were living in Sydney, and David used to work in downtown Sydney. It was about an hour's commute from our home to his offices. David is a workaholic, and I would call up in the late afternoons and I would say, are you coming home? You know, what are you expecting coming home? Because I need to figure out whether I was going to feed the kids, whether I was going to have dinner, when he was going to be home. He'd say, oh, what's the time? And I'd tell him the time and say, you know what, I'll leave in half an hour. Well, then you younger guys have no clue on what life is like back then. There's no cell phones, there's no communication, there's no microwaves to pop the dinner in. You've got to put it over a saucepan of hot water. And so I would look at my phone and I'd give him some grace, 15 minutes extra, and then I'd count the hour, and then I'd start heating his dinner 15 minutes before he's due to be home. I'd wait for another half an hour, turn it off. Then, anyway, this happened night after night after night. And I was like, okay, he's obviously not hearing me. I never know whether I've got to feed the kids early, when to put them to bed, whether they're going to see their father. Do I eat with the kids? Do I wait for him? Do I put the food on? Do I not put the food on? And so one night I lost it, and I just said, I thought maybe if I made him angry, because my parents resolved conflict by anger, maybe if I made him angry, we could actually talk this out and he could hear me, because he's obviously not hearing my other stuff. So I slapped him because for coming home late again. So I was pretty ticked. He looked at me and he said, don't ever do that to me again. He got in his car and he drove for 2 hours. Of course, by the time he came home, I'm a mess, and we did resolve it that night, and I thought, well, that wasn't a very good way of resolving any issues. Probably if I had my time again, I would pray more about it, and maybe, I don't know, how you get your husband's attention when you don't feel he's hearing you. It didn't definitely, well, I don't think it actually changed anything, but God had some, maybe it did a little bit, I don't think it did. But God had some better plans, because not soon after that, he actually left that work and started working from home. And so his workaholism was gone then, well, at least he was at home.
Thank you, Helen. I think that was important, that story in that context, because I think that makes a difference. Okay, so we're going to leave one last question for David. For the men who came tonight with their wives and the young men who came with their families today, what is the best advice you can give to the husbands or the young men that will be husbands one day? And fathers.
Probably two things. It took me to a midlife, to a 42, to get serious about Jesus. When I look at that movie, and I still cry most of the time I see it, and Helen sees it, it's not emotional for her, but for me, and I think I was a slow learner, and when I saw the hands and feet of Jesus, when I couldn't put food on the table and couldn't provide for my family, the church and Jesus did, that changed me. It moved me from lukewarm to passionate. And so if you're lukewarm, like I was, my encouragement is don't wait any longer. Get passionate now. Because what I can tell you at 14, I've had a wonderful life. I can't believe it. Most of my friends have not, second marriages, whatever, and not a lot of joy. I've only got only one out of my 7. I've got 7 accountability partners, and only one of those is with his first wife. And I pinch myself on occasions. Well, how have I had this? Because I'm a flawed Jesus follower. I don't get it right all the time. But I think I married a wonderful lady who's loved me unconditionally. The other thing that I would say, those who are married, I read a book 10 years into marriage by Larry Crabb called Inside Out. It had a chapter on unconditional love. And my marriage was good, but I knew I had work to do. And so I'd buy every marriage book. I'd come over to America for conferences and come back with 20 marriage books, and Helen would say to me, is there something wrong with our marriage? There wasn't. It was good, but I just knew I had work to do. I started loving Helen unconditionally, and overnight the marriage went from good to great. And part of it is I suddenly realized in that moment that all the little issues, and they were little issues, not really big issues. They were me. I was blaming her for things that I was bringing to the table. So I think the two comments would be loving unconditionally, and if it hadn't worked, I wouldn't be telling you. And then the other thing is what you saw in the movie. I think the good Lord put my family all through that stuff to grow me. And also, in a weird kind of way, to give both Rebecca and for King Country something to sing about. And so now they're going around the world singing about the hope in Jesus. So I'm, as I mentioned earlier, a God's economy guy. And if you've got work to do, go and do it. Because if you don't, you're going to have an ordinary life. But if you do live the adventure of the Christian life, I'm an apologist. It's extraordinary. I look at the way of the culture and I think to myself, the culture of death. And then I look at the way of Jesus, the culture of life. So, as you're probably picking up, I moved from lukewarm to passionate, and I'm now boringly passionate. But I have, most days I have joy in the journey. And as I said earlier when we first started, what an honor that you would come out and see this movie, probably a lot of cases about my failings, but then at the same time see the wonder of Jesus. And I suppose at the end of the day, my hope is you'll leave here tonight and take Jesus a bit more seriously and maybe talk about him to friends at work or people you know who need Jesus. And even if you're uncomfortable with that, encourage them to come and see the movie. Because we do know it is changing lives. We know that because we've been out doing previews for the last couple of months. So what a joy to be with you tonight. Godspeed, and I hope our paths cross again.
What an incredible testimony. I hope that you all were moved like I was with the words that Helen and David shared with us. God is so amazing and never left them, but instead weaved an incredible path for them. Hard times come on us all at different points in our life, but we must remember, like Helen did, to never take our eyes off of Him. Since I was in the moms group with Helen, I've heard some of these stories before, but seeing it played out brought a whole new level of respect for she and her husband. If you haven't already, please go see this movie, as I think it will greatly impact you. Thanks again to Helen for allowing me to share this video with you all, and thanks to the other girl in the picture, Amanda, for inviting me. You'll be hearing from Amanda soon, as she and her mom did a Raising Greats video for me, since she is a professional actress that has been in a lot of TV and films. Please like this channel and turn on the notifications so that you don't miss any of our upcoming interviews. And please share with your friends. My hope is that through these videos, it will encourage parents in their journeys of raising their greats. Have a great day. Bye.